Hi, I'm Nandan, currently a PhD student at University of Waterloo, and my colleagues are Jianmo, Gustavo, John, Jimmy, and Dan. All of us are going to present today SwimIR, which talks about leveraging LLMs for synthesizing training data across many languages in multilingual dense retrieval. Without further ado, let's look into the motivation of why we created SwimIR. And often the biggest problem or challenge which we faced is that multilingual retrieval systems require a lot of supervised or human annotated training pairs, which are uneven and scarcely present across many non-English languages. In the example or shown in the figure, here you find that monolingual sentences, which are highlighted in blue, they are decreasing drastically, and on the other hand, there is a much less percentage of sentence pairs which are bilingual, which are currently available to train such models. There are certain issues with existing retrieval datasets, and a majority of them can be classified either human annotated or machine translated. In human annotated datasets, there are certain disadvantages. First being that it is almost very expensive and cumbersome to recruit human annotators for labeling, and after the whole annotation procedure, you are often left with a low amount of supervised training pairs. An advantage of human annotated datasets is that you find a natural distribution of queries, and this is often useful for multilingual retrieval evaluation. On the other hand, if you have machine translated datasets, you suffer from translation ease because you're translating the English queries to different languages. So this also reduces the diversity in queries. But an advantage of machine translated datasets is that the amount of training pairs can often be high. Here in the table, we show the different datasets or existing retrieval datasets. And as you can see, a majority of them have been generated using a human, and only a few contain both the cross-lingual and the monolingual retrieval tasks. And a few of them, all of them contain very few languages and also very few training pairs. In contrast, in our work SwimIR, so we use Palm 2 to generate, we contain training pairs for both the cross-lingual and the monolingual retrieval tasks, as well as we cover a wider variety of languages, like 33 different languages, and provide 28 million training pairs, which is almost 20 times more than any of the existing retrieval datasets. Here is an overview of the different language distributions around the world, which have been available or included in the SwimIR datasets. So as you can see, we try to cover a wide variety of language speaking populations which are present across different locations in the world. And we also contain very low resource languages such as Yoruba, Swahili, to very high resource languages, for example, German, French, etc. Next, since now we got a brief overview of the SwimIR dataset, let's talk a bit about how we constructed our dataset. The first step is, as usual, is that we need to find a text corpus and need to give it as an input, where we would randomly sample passages and use these passages for synthetic data generation. In our work, we choose the English Wikipedia, or we choose Wikipedia from different languages, and then we use these Wikipedia passages. We sample these and then use those to generate the training data. After constructing this datasets, as a next step, what we do is we try to generate a multilingual query from the sample passage using an LLM. And we use the prompting technique known as summarize then ask prompting, in which we require a few handcrafted examples in English, and we translate those in different languages using machine translation. If you see the figure, so there are two different advantages in our prompting technique compared to a standard few shot prompting is that first, we ask the model to generate an extractive summary, which helps identify the large language model the relevant sections in the passage using an extractive summarization step. And next, using the summary as an intermediate step, we then ask the model to generate a query. And in our experiments, we have found our technique helpful to generate more informative queries. Next steps, the third and fourth, is after we have generated the query is to parse and filter the generated multilingual query. After we have done that, so we try to filter any harmful queries or low quality queries. And once we have filtered all the queries, we combine that to create a training dataset. And then we use that training dataset to fine tune a multilingual or a dense multilingual retrieval model. And so this model we will call as SwimX, and these are synthetic only models because they have been fine-tuned on synthetic only training pairs. This shows an example of dataset example in SwimIR. So the first top one shows a cross-lingual training pair example, and the bottom one shows a monolingual training pair example in which both the query and the passage are from the same language. Moving on now, let's talk more about the experimental setting in our paper and few of the main important results from our paper. First, our goal is to measure how well do synthetic only retrievers will perform against supervised or human label models. In order to do this, we try to evaluate on 3 different benchmarks: XOR-Retrieve, MIRACL, and XTREME-UP, where XOR-Retrieve and XTREME-UP are cross-lingual benchmarks, whereas MIRACL is a monolingual retrieval benchmark. You can find an overview of the benchmarks in the following table. Moving on now, let's talk about our experimental results. First, we denote all models with a subscript of EN to indicate they have been fine-tuned on the English MS Marco model, and the models with subscript of -X are indicated to be fine-tuned on English MS Marco plus some in-language supervised training data, whereas our work, which is the SwimX model, has been fine-tuned on only synthetic data. If you look at the table, so we have highlighted the bold or the best numbers in blue. Here you can find that our SwimX model outperforms the existing supervised models on 2 datasets, on XOR-Retrieve and XTREME-UP, whereas on MIRACL it underperforms the mContriever-X model. Moving on now, let's talk about some few research questions. And first, an interesting research question is how cheap is it actually to generate the synthetic data which we use in SwimIR? So in this figure, we have plot actually the annotation cost in USD on the x-axis, and you can see the percentage improvement on XOR-Retrieve in recall at 5 KT on the y-axis. And the corresponding training data pairs have been mentioned along the particular line. So here you can see that after 2 million synthetic pairs, our model starts to saturate, or the performance on XOR-Retrieve starts to saturate. Whereas if you want to outperform the best fine-tuned model, we can outperform after just generating about 100 to 250K synthetic training pairs. Next research question which we want to ask is whether the queries which are generated in SwimIR, are these really reliable or not? In order to do this, we conducted a human validation procedure where we gave human validations or human annotators certain guidelines and asked them to evaluate a sampled queries from SwimIR on 3 factors from a rating scale from 0, which indicates the worst, to 2, which indicates the best rating. So they were measured on fluency, which measures the coherence of the generated query. So here you would measure whether the query is readable, understandable, and whether it contains any grammatical mistakes or not. Second is adequacy, which measures the relevancy of the generated query with the passage. And third is the language, which detects whether the query was generated in the correct language or not. Overall, we conducted our human validation across 5 languages, and you can find that the fluency and the adequacy and languages for all queries are at least more than 63% for the best rating, which indicates a good quality of queries are currently present in SwimIR. Lastly, another interesting research question is, how do we extend SwimIR to more languages? And the answer is, we cannot naively extend SwimIR. There are limitations. Right now we support 33 languages. If you want to extend to 100, the cost required for each language is an incremental cost. Instead, in order to extend SwimIR for more languages, what we can do is we can try to target a few representative languages within the same language family and then rely on cross-lingual transfer for the rest of the languages within the family. In order to demonstrate this, in our paper we conducted a cross-lingual transfer experiment for different languages present within the Indo-European language family. So here on the y-axis, we actually fine-tune on just a single language, and on the x-axis we evaluate on certain Indo-European languages. So if you find few rows such as the Hindi row or the Gujarati row, often give you a good generalization across all the different Indo-European languages. As I would like to then conclude our work. So in our work, we developed SwimIR, which is a large-scale multilingual retrieval dataset covering 33 different languages and contains 28 million training pairs. Models fine-tuned on SwimIR often performed on par and sometimes even outperformed supervised or human-labeled baseline models. Third, multilingual query generation using SAP prompting, which we used in our experiments, is often a cost-effective alternative for human labeling in case if you want to generate queries across different languages. Few future work questions is that, can we cheaply improve the query quality in SwimIR dataset? Another things to consider is that, can we reduce the LLM hallucinations which are observed during multilingual query generation? Or can we look into techniques where we can mine or generate better hard negatives to improve the downstream retrieval performance? Thank you, and you can find all the paper details and contact details in this page in front of you. Thank you.